really thought putting in new chairs would make people still come and sit in these front rows. I promise I don't bite. So you still can. These front rows are open to everyone. I don't have a seat here. Any seat can be taken by anyone. Okay? So you're welcome to please sit in all of the seats. And don't feel bad if you haven't paid yet. You can also still sit in the nice chairs. Just make sure you pay. I did. Someone needed to hear that, huh? I'm a man of God for real, huh? Okay, let's wrap up. Next week, make sure you invite a friend, because we're going to have a special guest preacher, my favorite preacher of all the preachers that I have. Next week, Sunday, is going to be special. Mrs. Linda Mabika, who will be bringing the word next week. Still not sure how I feel, but that you like her more than me. Gwinyayi, behave. So we're going to wrap up today our prepared series. So if you listen fast, I'll speak even faster. And we'll try and tie it together. We left off and spent a lot of good time last week teaching around what sonship is. We were in the book of Chronicles. We read from chapter 22. We read verse 5 that read, David said, my son Solomon is young and inexperienced, and the house to be built for the Lord should be of great magnificence and fame and splendor in the sight of all the nations. Therefore I will make preparations for it. So David made extensive preparations before his death. That the idea and the concept of our prepared series, that God then does and places you together with other people even before he gives you an assignment or he gives you a task, that there's individuals who are meant to help you do what you've been called to do, and he has prepared them to prepare them with you. That he makes plans with other people, bring them together with you to do what he's called you to do. And in last week's sermon, we were looking at the fact that you're prepared generationally, that your pairing is not just peer-to-peer here and now, but that there's future generations, there's future people, there's past generations, there's past people that have done work, that will do work for you to be able to do what you've been called to do, who then even carry on what you're starting now and see it to completion. And we then looked at this relationship that we have and responsibilities that God gives us as his called people, that initially we step into his family as covenant people, that he then brings us close, that he then died on a cross so that we could be with him. But he doesn't stop there, that he then desires to disciple us, that we are then meant to walk through certain teachings, certain understanding, certain development processes, where in faith ministries we use 4 tools: the New Life in Christ book, the Habits for Life book, the book called Shape, and the last one called Mission for Life, as our discipleship tools. That it's good, yes, to be a convert. It's good, yes, to be part of his covenant, but you must grow beyond that and develop and become a disciple. That we then even understood that discipled people make disciples. That the real test of whether you're a disciple or not is if you are making other disciples who then also make disciples. And the song goes on and on, my friend. And then we then looked at the next stage of responsibility as being a steward, that God then gives you responsibility over things to then do and to carry them out. But beyond that, he requires for you to have a soldier mentality, that you're a fighter in the army, that you're a fighter at war, that there's then things that are going to be contested, that are going to be fought for, that you have to continue to fight for as well. But ultimately, he desires for you to be a son. That what he desires, what he requires, is to work and to build with sons. Because what sons do is they understand the heart of the Father. That they have within them what he desires, what he requires, and they finish what they've been called to do. That when he gives an instruction, sons see to completion that which they've been told to do. So we spent a good time last week understanding this progression to get to son. And our verse really reads, my son Solomon. I got stuck again at Solomon. Solomon means peace. And that there was now this understanding that God was speaking to me around that David's instruction, David's purpose was to fight. David's purpose was to contend. David's purpose was to do all the labor of fighting to get ready for Solomon, the son of peace, to be able to do and to build what he had been called to build. That David couldn't build because he was a man of war. He had shed too much blood. I pray for you today that God may give you sons. God may give you Solomons. God may give you peace. That you can't have peace though without war. That you can't have peace without actually fighting for it. War is disruptive. War is difficult. War is bloody. But in order for us to have peace, we have to contend for it. It's a bit of an oxymoron because you kind of think, but to get to this place of rest, there's work that still needs to be done, that you have to fight for peace. Not just for yourself, but even for your children. And I was reminded even of the character we used last week of Nehemiah, who then had to teach a people to build at the same time as fight. That with one hand, they would be laying bricks upon bricks, but with another hand, they'd have a weapon within their hands. And the God spoke to me and said, Gwinyayi, you have to have a people, you have to develop and build the people that are ambidextrous. Do you know that? You know what that means? I have a degree. Ambidextrous means that you're able to use both hands proficiently. So I'm actually able to write with my left hand, not as neat and legible. I used to play tennis. I can play tennis with my left hand and with my right hand. I'm mildly ambidextrous. My wife is giving me eyes like you're lying to God's people. We'll prove it on the court later, ma'am. But my desire for you is that as you're a people who are building generationally with your sons, you're also a people that are fighting generationally for your sons. And with both hands, in one hand, you never stop building, regardless of the contention, regardless of what comes against you, regardless of how difficult it gets, regardless of mariacho ikapera or zinusukajanya or Zimbabwe yacho ikatswinya. You don't stop building because you're ambidextrous. But it's my job to make sure that yes, with one hand you build, but that you're well equipped to fight with the other hand. That you never then get comfortable. You never then forget that there is one whose desire, whose aim, whose objective is to disrupt you. He doesn't want you to build. That peace is what you contend for, that it's difficult to build outside of peace. But you have to be an ambidextrous individual. Center Church, our members are ambidextrous. No matter how difficult the tough gets going, no matter how difficult it gets going, you never stop building. Because you are an ambidextrous people. Like those of Nehemiah. Sons build with one hand, they fight with another. Solomon, I told you, means peace. And I was reminded of Matthew 5 verse 9. Where Jesus tells us that blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called sons of God. That in a way, your ability to bring peace, your ability to fight for this peace that will be attacked, that you as a peacemaker, that's what qualifies you to be the son of God. And it's one of the things that defines you. A child of God is that you're one who brings peace and fights for it. That peacemakers are those who themselves are of a peaceable temper. They endeavor to promote peace in others, so far from sowing seeds of discord between any of their fellow men, that both studiously avoid contention themselves, but also labor to extinguish it wherever it prevails. That they heal differences between brethren and they reconcile contending parties. That they restore peace, but also they do what it takes to preserve peace. I pray that you would be a peacemaker. And where you go, where you are found, you bring peace. I was like, this guy is going to say things in a certain way. He's going to broker an understanding between these people that even they're going to call for Gwinyayi. Guys, where is Pastor Mabika? I think he might be able to do something about this situation because he's renowned for bringing peace. That's the definition of the sonship as we've seen it even now in Matthew 5. That even Christ himself was the highest founder of peace. The Son who brought peace between you and God is the ultimate peacemaker. One of the measures, one of the metrics that I use to determine whether the decision is right or not is the peace of God. That when I'm unsure about something, I pray, Lord, give me peace. And once I have peace, whether I'm right or I'm wrong, whether it works out or it doesn't work out, I can boldly, comfortably step into it, even if it doesn't go my way, because I know God gave me peace. May you be peacemakers. May peace speak to you. May peace confirm for you what God has for you. I wish we understood this even here at Center. 2 Corinthians 13 verse 11 says, finally, brothers, rejoice, aim for restoration, comfort one another, agree with one another, live in peace, and the God of love and peace will be with you. This verse challenged me a little bit to think that, so you're telling me that peace and unity are actually inviting to God. That you can create an atmosphere that God wants to be a part of simply by your peace and by your unity. That the God of love and peace will be with you when you cultivate peace, when you cultivate love. Husbands and wives, live with peace with one another. We had a young couples meeting yesterday. We had a good time. If you missed it, there's a senior couples meeting today. Sneak into that one, even if you weren't able to make yesterday's one. I know the host, they love having people in their house. They yearn for it. So they are happy to have you. So after church, about 12 at the Matindiki residence, go, even if you didn't make yesterday's, even if you're a young couple, and they'll teach you how to live at peace with one another. Okay. The rest of our passage of scripture in 1 Chronicles 22 goes on to tell us that David said to his son Solomon, who is young and inexperienced. And I want to spend a little bit of time looking at this idea of being young and inexperienced. Because I want you to know that God doesn't give you everything. That there are some things that he intentionally, yes, gives to you, but gives to someone else so that you can work with someone else. He makes sure that you have something, yes, Gwinyayi Mabika, young and inexperienced. But what he will do, he will give me those that are old and experienced. And we are to work together. And he would pair us to be able to do what we've been called to do. That you would be clear and you would know that you need each other. That there's a pairing of the young and experienced with the old and experienced. That you don't have everything you need, but you have it available to you. All you have is all you need. It's just maybe not always in you. Are you with me? Young and inexperienced is not necessarily just about age. At the same word for young here was used to refer even to Rehoboam in 2 Chronicles 13. And at that stage, I think Rehoboam was 42 years of age. But they called him young and inexperienced. That preparing generationally is about preparing for the future. That there's something even that a young and inexperienced person is able to gather and gain and get from an old and experienced person that sets them up for a future. That there has to be then a mixing of this wisdom and zeal and energy to be able to do what God has for us to do. I remember sitting and having a drink with Golden Girls and encouraging them around Titus 2 verse 4. that I wish at Center would have a better understanding of how these younger people and these older people are meant to come together. Where Titus then even breaks it down in terms of some responsibilities that older men should teach to younger men. That younger women should also learn from older women. That there's things that they carry, that they have, that are supposed to be passed on, that are supposed to be interchanged. That would make your life better, both ways, if that interaction took place more. Yes, Solomon was young and inexperienced, but Solomon was the one called to build. David was old and experienced. David was the one called to prepare. I'm excited for where you're going to go, Center Church, what you're going to do, simply because you understand certain principles. That you, the old and experienced, would work with the young and inexperienced and build what you've been called to build. I was taken to Proverbs 22 verse 3. And it says, the prudent see danger and take refuge, but the simple keep going and pay the penalty. One of the things that youth and inexperience does is you end up in certain places and spaces, you end up making certain decisions that if you had had the conversation, that if you had had someone walk with you, you might have avoided. And I think about David himself and how David was prudent in some of his dealings, but also he was very simple in some of his other dealings. That in preparing for Solomon and in storing up the wealth for Solomon to use, he was prudent. But in not going to war and doing some sightseeing on a roof, he was simple. That a prudent man would have seen danger, you young and inexperienced, when he was referring to Solomon, and take refuge. He then made preparations for Solomon. But in his simple behavior, he kept going. He then called out to Bathsheba. He then had her come in and lay with him. He then tried to trick Uriah. He then even arranged to have Uriah killed. And of course, he then paid the penalty. That he would then be a warrior forever. That he would then have an internal uprising within his family. That his son would then even die. That there were consequences for David's simpleness, where he kept going and he paid the penalty. My prayer for you again this morning is that you would be prudent. That you would see and take refuge. That you would identify and then act accordingly to deal with what is possibly coming. Don't be simple and keep going, because you'll pay a penalty. Yes, it's possible to escape and be forgiven, but the consequences of sin will remain. That even though David was forgiven by God, his son still died. 2 Samuel 12, verse 10 and verse 14 tell us that now therefore the sword shall never depart from your house. He's going to be a man of war, because you have despised me and have taken the wife of Uriah the Hittite to be your wife. Verse 14 of 2 Samuel 12. Nevertheless, because by this deed you have utterly scorned the Lord, the child who is born to you shall die. The consequences of your actions are going to follow you, even if God forgives you. So my plea, my cry, be prudent, see danger, and take refuge. Are you still with me? Prepared generationally, the thing that Solomon and David were prepared to do was to build the house. That in their preparation, they had to prepare to build. The temple that they were building was going to take them 7 years to build, and it was richly overlaid with gold. But its proportions were actually small. Some have regarded it to be merely the king's private chapel. But in any case, this house was not intended to contain a full congregation, because the courts would have had to be very large to accommodate it. Something maybe it was to keep the temple goods or to keep the furniture of the temple. But David still made extensive preparations for this building of the house. And with good reason, because it was intended for the honor of a great God. That there was the type of, it was a type of Christ, that in whom all fullness dwells and in whom all hidden treasures lie. That when you are prepared, you have to be prepared to build. In 2025, the National Council of Faith Ministries has given us a theme to run with. And that theme is building strong. That in the new season that we are stepping into, we're going to be builders. Not just builders, but builders that build strong. And God in his good wisdom then sent you a prophet to prepare you to build. That is, you get ready to build. You would do so strong. That would set certain foundations a certain way. That would then make preparations to be able to do what he's called us to do. To be able to build what he's called us to build. And whether you're a family starting up and you recently got married, there's a generation that you've been called to build. And there's then preparations that you've done that you're going to continue to do. And you've been paired to build generationally. That whether you intended to or not, make this your home church, you've been paired with me. And there's some building that we're going to do in the season to come. That I'm ready. And I hope you are. Because God is preparing us to build. In Luke 14:28, he says, suppose one of you wants to build a tower. Won't you first sit down and estimate the cost to see if you have enough money to complete it? Won't you now sit down as we close out November of 2024, count the cost to see whether you have enough to build what God is calling you to build. Not just to build it, but to build it strong. We'll unpack this as the weeks go, as we proceed, that you, members of Center Church, are prepared now to build. For the men, November is your month of preparation. For you, I'm not talking to the ladies right now. I'm talking to men now. November is where we're going to prepare to build strong. Not in January, in November. As priests of our homes, we're going to prepare before the year begins. And there's a program we'll run through. And we'll work in November. I think we might even pray and fast, maybe the first week of November. Have some series of teachings and work through some stuff. And I sat down with the committee last week and we discussed a few things. And I think for men in November, you're going to reset. We're going to demolish some things and get ready to build. For far too long, our families have suffered because of our failure to be prepared to build. Zimbabwe as a nation has suffered. Children have suffered because the men haven't been ready. November 2024, Center Church men are going to reset and get ready to build. Okay? Okay, back to everyone and talking to everyone else as well. I want you to prepare to build. I don't know what that means or what that looks like for each and every one of you. Some of you might have already started building some things that you might need to demolish. I'm just a messenger. Don't shoot the messenger. That because of the way, because of who you started building with, you need to rethink that building. That there's an architect who knows a pattern in which you should be building with. If you've been coming for a few weeks, I know this is clicking and hitting some points in your heart and in your soul. That we need to reset some of the buildings and the projects we've been on to build properly so we can build strong. Remember, the foundation is what determines the size of this building. Whether it can go up and it can remain and it can stand against certain winds, certain things that might come against it. That if we don't get that right, we've wasted time, we've wasted resources, we've wasted energy. Because when the enemy comes, we won't be able to stand. He'll huff and puff and he'll blow your house down. What nursery rhymes have I been listening to this week? I want to close with the benediction from 2 Thessalonians 3 verse 16. It says, now may the Lord of peace himself give you peace at all times in every way. The Lord be with you all. It's hard to build when you're at war. So seek out and find peace internally, within your environment that you live in, and even externally, that you may be able to build. So I'll say it again as we close. Now may the Lord of peace himself give you peace at all times, in every way. The Lord be with you all. Thank you. Auntie Tsitsi, I'm done.